Larry, round two. Larry, you're the
Hey.
you're the first guest outside of like just me talking to my mates that I've had on twice.
Well, good.
It's exciting. I didn't think people would want to come back. But
Yeah. Well, no, you said some really nice things about me. I can always come back for more compliments.
yeah, it doesn't hurt, right? It doesn't hurt. What have you been up to? You just said you're gonna go get a haircut. Did they is that a
Yeah.
recent thing that's just been back open, or is it have you been able to get
Quite a
haircuts?
lot of things are back open, but not everything. So finally we can get haircut. Actually, somebody comes to my house and cuts mine and my wife Sarah's hair. So that's really nice.
That's fancy.
And so she'll be here later on. The big thing for me is resuming playing golf. That was, been possible for about 3 weeks now. And then next month, middle of the month, places like pubs and restaurants will open up. So we can actually eat. At the moment, we can go and eat outside, just have a beer or something outside, but not inside. But then we're hoping to be able to go inside to places, which also means we can start, thinking about maybe taking a weekend break or something like that.
Yeah, nice. It's good that things are starting to go back to normal. We're starting to get a bit of normality back into our lives.
It is here. We're very mindful about places like India and European countries where the vaccination rollouts aren't happening and the COVID rates are escalating. Mindful too of other issues that people have, like in Australia, you've had floods. Is that right? New South Wales?
Yeah, if it's in Australia, we kind of got like a weird balance between floods and fires. So the year before we had those monstrous fires that took up, that burnt everything down really, and then this year we've been blessed with floods. So we get a little bit of everything down here. A little bit. We're lucky because we don't get tornadoes, but we get everything else. We get the floods and the fires. So
I know that fire is part of the natural history of Australia, the bush. I know that there are trees there that the seed pods of which require fire to open them up. So, it's clearly part of the natural history of the country. I was in Adelaide when they had the Ash Wednesday fires, which was back in whenever that was, in the 1980 or 79, 80, 81, I can't remember which year. And so, it's astonishing that people will build housing where there, is such a strong possibility of fires happening. It's same in California. But I guess that things are worse these days with climate change, and more and bigger fires are happening. So it's tragic. It's great tragedy.
Yeah, like you're saying, we just got a message through. Many of the species in Blue Mountains need fire to reproduce properly. I think Australia's a lot like that, where we need the fire. I think the problem was they mishandled it, I think, apparently. So it spread a lot further and a lot faster than anybody anticipated. Once again, it is a part of like Australia's sort of like history, and it's really, really well engrossed in what Australia is about. But I think there was a part there where they wanted to bring the Indigenous people in to help, and I think the government said no. Where
Really?
they've been doing it for so long, and they didn't take the advice of the Indigenous people.
That's a shame. I've read that that's happening. I subscribe to something called Positive News.
Yeah.
So you get a bulletin every week about what's good going on, good things that are happening. And one of them was one of the items just within the last few weeks was about the native Aboriginal people managing fires in a different way. Forget the details, but they manage it in a sustainable way, not just burning off, making fire breaks by just burning off stuff, but they actually do it in a way that is healthy for the both the plant life, trees, and the animals' life. So anyway, I think there are things. I think there's enormous amounts to be learned from First Nation peoples of all countries.
Yeah,
wisdom, great wisdom. They hopefully will be able to maintain and pass on, at least within their own cultures, and perhaps also to those of us from other cultures who are interested. Because, I mean, I can just imagine a planet in which the only real survivors are the native people.
That's where we're headed, right?
We sort of third world people will don't have the skills.
Yeah, that's right. It's a weird thing that you wouldn't at least want to learn from them. I think it's like if you, I don't know what it's like everywhere else, but I think here there's a certain sense of like we don't want to deal with it. Like obviously the genocide didn't help, and then the continuation of that. So it's if we don't deal with it at all, then we don't need to approach anything. We don't need to learn anything. We can just sort of try and like repair it by doing silly little things that don't mean a lot to the indigenous people. We got a little backwards here with that, but hopefully it's getting a little better. Hopefully our politicians are listening a little better, but you know what people are like. People are, if we don't know and we don't understand it, then it's bad. It's immediately demonized.
Well, yes, and
scary.
And also as a result of the way the Aboriginal people were treated, taken away from the land, deprived of their sense of responsibility, in fact, their sense of meaning and purpose, and therefore in their spiritual life being badly impaired, many of them resorted to alcohol, gambling, and other issues that then left them at the mercy of the critics who would say, well, they're terrible, they're bad people. But they're like anybody who, if you take away their soul, their heart, and meaning of their lives, then that's what happens.
Yeah, but that's exactly right, isn't it? But once again, it's not happening to us, so then we don't want to deal with it. It's a really bizarre, and I guess at our level, it's sort of mind-boggling that there's not just an immediate change. Something that they can just like have a chat to them about and go, all right, we're going to start implementing these things. I still find it very bizarre. Like even here in Canberra, we have the Tent Embassy, which is the Aboriginal embassy in Australia, and it's parked right out the front of, I think, the old Parliament House, which is it's so crazy that it exists in a sense that they've given them tents on the grass to have an embassy at, and now it's just become sort of like it's like this meaningful structure to them now, but it just doesn't even compare to giving them an actual property and an actual residence to go to. So it's a little insane that it's come down to them just having tents, and I think that really sort of demonstrates the lack of communication between the two parties. It's a one-sided lack of communication rather than the indigenous people not wanting to talk. They just got nobody to talk to. But it's I guess it's like it's 2021 and these little things still exist that just don't make sense to most people, where it's like it's kind of crazy that Aboriginal people have a tent embassy at the front of like a white person's giant home, essentially, where all the white politicians go to argue about things.
It is an anomaly. It is. Yeah, you're right. I'm interested that you kind of, there's probably no way of having this conversation without doing this, but you talk about them. So there's them and us and them. Actually we're all us or we're all them. You know what I mean?
I think that's such a bad thing that we get in our head. And I think, like you were exactly right. There should never, ever be a them and us. And I fell into it just then. I think it's just such a weird thing that's been like, whether you stand for it or not, it's like it's there, and there's always a them and us, and it's a very hard thing to not say and not word, even though you don't mean it like that. You know what I mean?
I think you, from my experience, one has to train oneself not to think in them and us all the time, and it helps to just remind oneself from time to time that, you know, we are all kin, we are all of one kind, genetically and in all sorts of others, and spiritually we are seamlessly bonded to our brothers and sisters who look different, or who have different religions, cultures, belief systems, diets, you know, everything. Everything that's different. Underneath it, there's the same. There's something that's more profound that is part of a greater unity. Anyway, that's the kind of spiritual worldview that I have come to espouse these days. So that, and I have very limited encounters with Aboriginal people when I was in Australia, but I did have one or two. As I went to Uluru.
Yeah, nice.
I walked around the base of it. I did not climb it. And when I was in that area, I encountered a man who was an Aboriginal man, and we didn't have a conversation. We just stood and looked at each other and smiled and looked into each other's eyes. And I just felt a great brotherly feeling, you know, towards that fellow. And he, I assume, must have felt warmly towards me. And it was a very brief encounter, but it was very powerful and meaningful. There was another thing that happened to me, which is connected with Australian Aboriginal people. When I lived in Adelaide, I was introduced to a woman who was the widow of, she was English, and her husband was a professor of anthropology, and he had gone to Australia to study the native people and spent a lot of time with the Aboriginal tribes. I don't know whether one particular tribe or another, but and he was studying their initiation rites and ceremonies and so on. And he enlisted his wife's help in his studies to investigate the initiation rites of the women. So she went through some initiation ceremonies with the women, and she told me, I was just meeting her on a sort of one-to-one at her house, the only time I met her. She was quite elderly. She told me, she said, I never tell people this, but I've got a reason for telling you, which I will in a minute. She said, after I went through the initiations, I developed some special powers, like clairvoyance. And she said, I'm telling you because I've got an image of you, Larry, as a baby, as an infant, sitting on the knee of a man, and together you are playing with a gold watch chain. I can't see a watch, but that's what I can see. And I wondered if you know who that man is and whose knee you were sitting on, because clearly he's really important to you. So I didn't really immediately think who it could be, because the only person I'd ever seen a picture of, a family member with a gold chain, was my father's father, but he had died long before I was born. He died in 1936, and I was born in 1950. So obviously I could never sat on his knee. Anyway, it happened that a few weeks later, I was back on a holiday back in the UK, and I visited with my mother and grandmother, and I mentioned this, and my grandmother immediately said, that was your grandfather. That's, I say, my mother's father. She said, he never did get a watch to put on that chain. So how did this Australian Aboriginal woman, this English woman who had gone and spent time with Australian Aborigine, develop these powers, get this image of me as an infant with my grandfather that I didn't even have a memory of?
That's
but that isn't even the end of the story.
Oh wow!
I don't know if I meant it last time that we spoke, but my grandfather had by this died, and his last words to me were, "See you in 4 years." Now, I said, "No, I'm coming to see you again tomorrow, Grandad." He was in the hospital.
Yeah.
He had lung cancer. And no, he just held up his hand like this and a huge smile, 4 fingers and a huge smile. And I said, "I'm coming to see you tomorrow." And he just smiled, and he died 2 hours later.
Whoa.
So I was 27. So I thought, oh, does he mean I'm going to die and go to heaven and see him?
Yeah.
And I spent about a year ignoring that. And then I spent the next 2 or 3 years thinking about it. Well, suppose I am going to die when I'm 31. Well, I'm going to die sometime anyway. What would I change about my life? What would I do differently? How would I like to be and live? So it set me on a path, if you like, or I probably was already on something of a path, like you could say a wisdom-seeking journey. And it opened up. It would take a long time to tell you all of the stories that relate to this one phenomenon, but I can tell you that after another 2 or 3 years, I did have a kind of breakthrough in which I lost my fear of death entirely.
Right.
And that's the first thing. And the second thing is that I came to understand what my grandfather meant, or may have meant, as seeing like unconditional seeing without any kind of interference or barriers, and that his way of seeing was love, so that I felt one day this immense like blanket of warm, bright love from my grandfather, and similarly felt my love for him, which hadn't been the case in life. I mean, I probably have felt it unconsciously, but we'd never kind of spoken in that kind of way. And he was not an educated man. He was a building site laborer most of his life. And he was not a verbal person. He wasn't a talker. But anyway, it gave me a sense of self-worth that was, really powerful. And it was a wonderful experience. And as I say, it helped me in my personal quest for authenticity and learning how to live a good life. It was good.
So did anything happen?
All that relates back to those Aboriginals and their
yeah, that's right.
Their powers.
Did that feeling come at the 4-year mark? Is that what you're saying?
Say again?
That feeling that you got where you we sort of accepted things. Did that come at the 4-year mark?
Oh yeah, it came up probably maybe just a little bit ahead of that.
So it was right. So in 4 years.
There was some other
He's got you back.
Things involved. Somebody I had been very close to also got terminal cancer. And so I was having to face not just, the possibility of my own death, but actually the death of a close friend also.
Yeah.
I had a dream one night, for instance, in which I was killed, but I was alive.
Okay.
Some bullets shattered through my head.
Yeah.
And yet I was still there. And it was like, oh. And then there was another time, around the same time, when Again, this happened in Adelaide. I lived in an old style bungalow with thick walls and a tin roof.
That sounds about right.
And I woke in the night and there was this absolute horrendous rainstorm. But when I woke up again in the morning, the sun was shining and it was bright and everything looked beautiful and clean and fresh. And when I opened my bedroom door, there was this what seemed at the time a huge lizard on the floor looking up at me as I opened the door. And for some reason, because I was so reflecting so closely on my own death at the time, I thought, oh my goodness, this is my death. It's come to greet me. And I got a great pulsing of the heart and a feeling of fear, which all I thought to myself, oh, I just got to calm down. I just got to let this calm down. And I went into another room. I managed to get past this creature, and I got into another room, just sat there, and I don't know, for quite a long time while I calmed down. And then when I felt okay again, I went and had a shower, which was down the hall. And when I couldn't see this lizard, but when I came back from the shower to go to the bedroom, there it was again. And I looked at it and I said, oh, it's just a small little creature. It's a feeble little thing. And it's more frightened of me than I of his. I mean, I assumed it had come into the house to get out of the wet, you know. And that marked a moment of growth for me. I didn't fear death ever after that. I did have a moment where I felt a kind of grieving.
Yeah.
I was again in South Australia. I was driving along. It was a beautiful evening, and I must have been outside the city, because I sort of remember that the sea. I was driving away from the sea. I could see the sea in the mirror of the car, and it was a beautiful hillside with eucalyptus trees and all this. And I suddenly found myself just weeping. I had to just pull off the road because I couldn't see. Because I thought, oh, I've got to leave this behind. I've got one day, whenever it is that I die, I've got to leave all this behind. And it was like I was weeping for myself. I was grieving for myself. I mean, what are we now? 50 years on or something? No, 40 years on.
Yeah, right. You've gone through the whole process. It's isn't there stages to accepting death? I think it's like even on both sides, right? Like. Yeah. If you know something, the grieving process, and then there's the process that I think people go through when they find out they're dying.
Yeah,
you've already been through it.
I've done it. I've been there. And my wife Sarah she's kind of amused because I say, for goodness sake, if I collapse, let me die. Don't let the paramedics near me.
Yeah, that's it. Just let it go.
I don't want to be resuscitated.
Well, we're actually talking about this before. I think me and my partner with. This is Prince Philip. I know this is pretty well off topic. It just reminded me. It just circled back how it was like. I think he was like a man who was just like, just let it go. I think he's done enough. He's had enough life. I guess like you probably get to that point in your life, right, where you just like I've seen everything, I've done everything, I've ticked all the boxes. There's a really weird thing around death. I guess it's like I guess there's like the mourning and the missing, and it's typically always like really sudden. So then there's that knee-jerk emotional reaction to it. But I always found like death really weird because we know it's coming and we know it happens. And yet you always get the same response. You know what I mean? There's a great amount of fear going into it if you're the one dying, and then there's a great amount of sadness if you know somebody who's dying. But I don't know. I think there's something like oddly calming about it. For some reason, like I've had a lot of people in my life like pass away, and I think the saddest I was ever was like when my puppy died when I was young, and then after that there was like a weird sense of like it's like that it's not done. You know what I mean? Like it's not this like infinite end. And I think that I don't know if it was like a defense mechanism in my brain going like you don't like being sad. But then it was always like I'll see you later rather than a goodbye. I guess that's probably the best way to explain it. And then like ever since then, like death hasn't been horrendous for me. once again, I don't know if it's a defense thing, but I think that there has to be a little more to it, right? You know, it can't just be this, you're in the ground and that's the end of it. There has to be something, surely.
I think a lot of spiritual guides and teachers and philosophers talk of death as a teacher.
Yeah.
I remember many years ago, before all this that I've been telling you, I can't just for the minute remember the main book that this fellow wrote, but anyway, he said, imagine death as a great bird on your shoulder, and imagine it as a friend, a great raven or something such thing. And the idea is, and also the ancient Greek philosophers, they used to recommend contemplating your own death as a spiritual exercise, so that each moment might be your last, but each moment is also your first. It's like everything's new right now, and it makes life vibrant, vital, real. Yeah. You know, the fact that you may not survive this day, and for each of us, actually, that's true, and nothing brings that home more powerfully than the COVID epidemic.
Yeah,
you know, it spares nobody. So it is something that it's almost too late. If you leave it till you're dying, it's almost you've left it too late to get the benefit, if you like, of the perspective that death gives you.
Yeah,
and I think the culture we have is out of balance because so many people have the almost expectation that modern technology, modern medicine can fix things.
Yeah.
Which, of course, to a great degree, in an astonishing degree, it can fix things. But you know, it doesn't take you long as a medical student and as a doctor to realize that actually it can prolong life. It can't prevent death.
Yeah.
Ultimately, you know.
But I think that's
and so that is a great.
Sorry, you go.
Go on.
I was just going to say, I think.
No, you. I do a lot of the talking. I really. We were talking about me going to interview you, but
yeah, that's right.
I've been doing all the talking.
I think it's like people. This whole extension of life, isn't it? Just like this. This is going to sound harsh, and like you said, the fear of death, or the fear of anything, can either be used to sort of squash you down, to stop you from moving forward. Look at it in like the most simplest things, like going to go ask a girl on a date, going to start your own business. Like there's all these things that fear stops you from doing and stops you from moving forward, where death is like the ultimate version of that, where it's like, it sort of stops you from doing things in life from this ultimate fear that you can't come back from it. But I think if you use fear to harness yourself, like you said, where it can be, rather than be looking at like, this could be the last thing I do, it could be the next thing that you do because of it being the last thing you could do. If that makes sense. Like it's it's a driving force. Make it an
adventure. Make it an adventure.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, a friend of mine who's 80 something had to have an operation. I think it was on his heart.
Yeah.
So there's a significant risk to that. I said to him, and he was frightened. I mean, he was a stiff upper lip type of person, wouldn't want to show it, but I knew he was frightened. I said, well, look, making an adventure, you're going to have an adventure. And that changed his attitude. He went home and told his wife, I'm going to treat it like I'm having an adventure. And of course, he came through it fine. He was absolutely fine.
Yeah.
So I've got a friend who is called Monica Renz, R-E-N-Z. Monica is she's head of what's called psycho-oncology in a big hospital in Switzerland.
Yeah.
And psycho-oncology is the psychology of dying, really. Oncology is about treating cancer, isn't it? So So she's also a musician, and she's written a couple of terrific books, which one is called "Dying a Transition," and she speaks about the stages, if you like, or the transitional phases that people go through right to the last. Putting their houses in order, both in terms of the sort of nuts and bolts of their finances and the mortgages and all that sort of thing, but also their relationships and also to some extent their spiritual lives. And this is why, in a sense, I'm not totally in favor of the idea of, there's a couple of reasons why I'm not in favor of the idea of assisted dying. When people are terminally ill, they go for assisted dying.
Yeah.
I can understand how people want to avoid the sort of helplessness of they may feel, the sort of obviously the pain and suffering and so on, but people go on growing, it seems, as people right through this process. And also they provide an opportunity for other people to get close to them in the way that they hadn't been able to necessarily before. And I suppose there's another argument against assisted dying, which is that, I'm a doctor, but you couldn't ask me to kill another person. I wouldn't, or assist them to die. I would think that would be harmful to my soul, really, to put it that way.
Yeah, that's
it's topical because I think there's been yet another call to introduce legislation to allow it to happen in this country fairly recently. So, the debate will go on. But anyway, my own thoughts are there that people go on growing, and another thought that I've been having recently concerns what happens when you die. What happens when you die? I mean, if the fear is of death? I remember there was a kind of humorous broadcaster in America who once said who claimed or had somebody claiming to be able to speak to people who had died or listen to people who had died. Anyway, so one of these voices came through and they said, "Well, you know, the thing about death is it's completely safe. Nothing can happen to you again once you're dead.
That's it. You can only get it once."
I mean, I don't know what happens. I don't know what happens when people die. I absolutely don't know. I don't. But I'm looking forward to finding out, even if it's nothing, even if it's oblivion. I mean, I'm still excited by the idea that eventually, one's life comes to a close. But I'm increasingly attracted to the idea of reincarnation and rebirth. I have no reason to believe that it happens. No reason particularly to reject it. In fact, there is some reason to believe it because there are people doing research on children who remember their previous lives and can recognize, objects and places and people from their earlier lives. And I've read some of that research. But I think, why am I learning the guitar? Why did I start learning the guitar when I'm in my late 60s and now in my 70s, and I'm still having lessons and trying to get better at having the guitar? And I think, well, who knows? Maybe I'll be a gifted musician in my next incarnation. I don't know. Why do I go on writing and reading things and trying to get my golf handicap down and all that kind of stuff? Well, maybe, who knows? Well, if you're actually even more to the point, why do I try continually to, as it were, become a better person, a wiser person, a kinder person? Well, in some way, that seems to me that even when I'm no longer around, it might be contributing to the well-being of others on the planet. One can only hope. Anyway, what's the alternative?
Yeah, I think regardless of what you believe in, it's pretty I think it only varies who you talk to at the time and their particular position in life, what they believe in, what happens at the end. I guess you'll find that people who have this sort of pessimistic view of the world just believes that it ends. It's just done. Like everything's bad here, so nothing good can happen after. You know what I mean? Whereas like if you're fairly optimistic, you believe in something a little larger. I think also that some of it may have been ruined by religion in a sense that, you know, the idea of death comes with judgment. It's not just like you die and then something else happens. It's like you die and then you have to go get approval from someone to live happy forever, or you get sent to hell, you know? So I think that sort of like skewed people's like vision on what actually happens at death. And I think they've interviewed people that have actually died, and come back, and like
near-death experience, yeah.
And the stories vary. I think there's actually like a documentary, like I think it's a limited series on Netflix that I watched a little bit of people who have died and come back, and the stories are crazy. It's you know, some of them like being told that. I remember one story. It was this lady was whitewater rafting and she fell overboard and drowned. And then she was like, I saw the light. And then I saw this being. I couldn't make it out. I think this is it. I'm paraphrasing. I'm sort of probably butchering it. And then she was like, this thing told her to spend time with her son because she doesn't have that long with him. And then it told her like he will pass away when he turns like 18 or something. And it was something that she sat on for so long and she didn't tell him. And then eventually she told him, and then right before he turned 18, he died. He was in a car accident. So it's like, how do you take that story and go like, there's nothing happens afterwards, or was it just like the brain? You know what I mean? Like, how could you have known? Just like the story with you with the lady at Uluru. It's like, how do you know that there has to be there's this weird line between like us as we are now, and then there's something else. And I think it's just we don't know what it is. And it's I think like you're saying the prospect of death, and I think like even you saying it or anybody saying it, going, I'm excited to see what it's about. Everyone goes, you're a little crazy.
I'm definitely a little crazy. Actually, a lot crazy in many people's terms. But then, you know, I'm a psychiatrist. Why not? You know, I mean, you're going to be tarred with that brush. You might as well live it.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
I'm happy. You know, I'm a glad mad. You know, there are only 4 kinds of madness, I think, and I think it goes like this. There's bad mad. And then there's mad, which is like angry mad. And then there's sad mad. And then there's glad mad. So I'm glad mad.
Sounds like a Disney movie. Old sad mad and glad mad.
But actually, going back to the thing about the near-death experiences and out-of-body experiences that people have, I've read a lot about that. In fact, it's fallen to me a couple of times in the last 2 or 3 years to read and review books on those subjects. In fact, I just not long ago finished reviewing a book by a friend of mine who has chapters on those things. Now, there are a lot of, and I've met people who research. I met a chap called Pim Van Lommel. Pim Van Lommel is a cardiologist, a heart specialist, whose patients started telling him about their near-death experiences.
Yeah,
and he, of course, was quite skeptical, but now he's completely converted to the idea that, and he's he'll tell you 1 in so many thousand cases of heart attacks victims have these experiences, etc. Yeah. And there are some common factors. A great light that is brighter than anything but doesn't hurt the eyes. A tunnel sometimes. Being told that your time isn't up, you've got to go back, you've work to do.
Yeah.
Reflecting on what you were talking about, the judgment aspect, they get a life review, but it's not like judgment. It's like you relive your life, but from the point of view of the people you've interacted with. In other words, if you say something nice to somebody or do something nice for somebody, you feel that the warmth and positivity that person feels. And similarly, if you've been unkind in some way or neglectful or some way to some, or done some harm to somebody, you feel that as if you were your own victim.
Yeah.
It's an educational experience. It's not a judgmental one. It's about learning about yourself and how to be better. That's how people describe it. I mean, I've met people who've had such experiences where they've met a being who sort of glows and tells them things. Whether how I mean, according to the researchers, these people are dead. They are clinically dead. There's no brain activity going on at all. So what's happening? Well, we don't know. It's a mystery, and I rather enjoy mystery. I mean, I think that there are things that we cannot know. Science has limits.
Yeah,
Fine.
I think that probably explains the whole heaven and hell thing, right? Like, I think, who was I talking to? Anyway, so it's like you take the Bible and you take anything that's in it, the heaven, the hell, the God, the devil, all that type of stuff, and you can sort of relate it back to something, right? It's just been like extrapolated over years and twisted and turned and made bigger out. No, it comes down to like, even nowadays, if you go to the pub and you talk to somebody, they'll tell you the biggest story possible, and it's only 10% of it. So you could sort of probably go, maybe they kind of did that with the Bible to push it a little harder. So even what you were saying just then kind of makes a little bit of sense, where it's like if you die and you come back, because people back then would have died and maybe made it through somehow, and they go like, I felt this warmth and happiness and joy. And then people just associate it because when you die, it's forever. You're going to feel that forever. So that good feeling that you got, that's a heaven, and we'll apply that to God, and that makes sense. And then they go, well, then I died and I felt like shit because I'm a horrible person. They're like, that's the devil right there. That must be hell. You know what I mean? So it kind of makes sense. I wanted to ask you about something. This thing has been bothering me forever. I was watching this YouTube video, just something random, and I think it sort of relates to what we're talking about now. There was a man. He found a girlfriend in high school. Loved her to death. Went throughout his life with her. Had kids. Got married. Got a job. He's having like a terrific life. And then one day he was laying on the lounge. His partner and his kids were out. He was laying on the lounge watching TV. Out of the corner of his eye, you could see a red lamp. Every time he looked at the lamp, it was like kind of blurry. It was super blurry, and he looked around and nothing else was blurry. And he kind of tried to ignore it. His kids and wife came home. He put him to bed. He kept staring at the lamp, and it just remained blurry, right? So this continued on for days and days and days. He just kept staring at the lamp. He took time off work. His wife started to really worry. And as this was going on, the lamp started to get bigger, right? Bigger and brighter and bigger and brighter. And then eventually, after, I think he said about a week or 10 days or something, the lamp was so big that it filled the entire room. And then he woke up back in high school. So 10 years later, I think it was, he woke up to a policeman rushing over to him, picking him up, and then running him, like taking him to the hospital. So the morbid part of the story is obviously afterwards, like it was so real for him. He had crushing depression because he just lost his wife. He just lost his kids. And there's a part of his brain that used to see, like when he was asleep, that used to see his son. And his son was trying to talk to him, and he couldn't hear him, and he couldn't say anything back. Would that be something to do with the brain activity? Like, how would your brain do that to you? Have you heard of this story, or is it some guy making shit up?
I haven't heard of the story, and I don't know is the answer. I don't know how. I mean, I don't think anybody really understands dreams at all, how they happen. I happen to be a prolific dreamer. Most nights I dream sometimes 2 or 3 dreams.
Yeah.
I don't always remember them. I don't always bother to remember them, but sometimes quite a lot I do. They don't often make a lot of sense. There are some recurring themes in the dreams I have. I don't know. I mean, okay, we know a little bit about brain activity during dreaming, the rapid eye movement, sleep phase, and its associated brain waves and so on, patterns, but that it doesn't kind of explain a lot. You know, there have been so many theories. I prefer to just take them as they are. And, you know, sometimes I tell Sarah about it in the morning if I've had a particularly vivid or, you know, powerful dream. Some of them are good dreams. Some of them are uncomfortable.
Yeah.
They're not really nightmares, but they're just not very nice. Quite often they're related to, you know, my daily activities, driving my car, playing golf, stuff like that, you know. I mean, yeah, they don't make sense. So I know I can't help you, Josh, with that story. I really don't know what it was about.
I'm gonna ask everybody. I gotta know more about this.
I mean, there is something I'm struggling to think through and try and say about that. I mean, that people do have life-changing experiences, either during dreams or other kind of what do they call them, abnormal mental states, or non something mental states. I forgot exactly what the terminology is, but and sometimes induced by hallucinogenic substances and so on, you know.
Yeah.
or hypoxia, you know, people who deliberately reduce their oxygen supplies and things like that. You get a kind of, you get it, just altered states of mind. And there's quite a lot of, I mean, a lot of literature, isn't there? A lot of accounts of spiritual experiences. And so the discussion is about whether they are valid spiritual experiences, if they're induced by some sort of a peyote drug or something like that, or LSD. I think there was a famous experiment in which theology students, I think it's a long time since I read it, and it was even longer since it was conducted and written up. But anyway, some theology students were split in two, and half of them over a particular religious weekend, half of them were given LSD and the other half weren't. And the ones with LSD kind of, it made a difference to them in their experiences of the weekend, and in terms of their, if you like, their whole life spirituality.
Oh yeah.
There is some alcohol is widely used as an adjunct to religious celebrations too. So inducing altered states, I suspect it's something to do with damping down the sort of logical left side of the brain and letting the holistic, sort of more creative and intuitive, and if you like, spiritual right side of the brain take over, or at least have more influence. Something about that. You know, it's difficult to know, and of course, I certainly wouldn't recommend using substances as a pathway to spiritual development unless you're pretty advanced already. There is actually somebody who has done a guy called Chris Bache, B-A-C-H-E, Chris Bache. Where's his book? I've got his book right here. I can't just see it on the shelf. I'm looking at my shelf here. But he was a psychologist who, he is a psychologist who, over a period of something like 20 years, took, I forget how many, let's say 120 LSD trips under controlled conditions. So he had a room in his house it was always on a Saturday when he wasn't doing anything else. His wife was, or somebody else was, make sure he was okay. And he would take a good big dose of LSD in the morning. And then he would spend the Sunday of that weekend writing up his recollection of what he went through. And it's a very remarkable account. I mean, he went through some really unpleasant experiences. It makes you physically unwell, a lot of purgation, literally, being sick and diarrhea and all that kind of horrible stuff, but also some terrifying experiences but also some fantastic ones, which he almost, he decided in, I forget when, in the late 90s or early 2000s, he decided to stop, and it hasn't done it since. But he still occasionally seems to miss the high ecstatic part of the experience.
Yeah.
Now, he makes a strong case for a spiritual, a spiritual that what's real is spiritual, and what the lives we live are all kind of like just the froth on the surface of the deep spiritual reality underneath it all. I just have another quick, see if I could just, because I wanted to tell you the title of the book, so that it's something about.
What was his name again?
Beige. Here it is. LSD and the Mind of the Universe. Ooh. Diamonds from Heaven. His name is Beige, B-A-C-H-E. I've emailed backwards and forwards with him a little bit. I think it's a bit like, he's a bit like a pioneer, like Neil Armstrong going to the moon. He's somebody who's really taken a step in a way that I would not recommend, and I'm sure he wouldn't recommend anybody else doing. But it is fascinating.
Yeah, he'd be a guy I'd love to chat with. That'd be great.
Oh, well, he might do that. He's in America.
I'm gonna email him. But I think
I've got his. I can let you have his email address.
That'd be great. I'll have a chat to him about it. I
think there's a long line of people want to talk to him as well.
I can guarantee it. I can guarantee.
I mean, I sent him a copy of my my big book of wisdom, hoping that he would endorse it, but I basically got the message that actually I have too much to read.
That's right.
So sorry, Larry, but never mind. But good luck to him. I think he's he's done a great service and taken a big risk. And
it's there's a couple of guys out there that they advocate for like magic mushrooms and LSD in terms of I think they're starting to use it for like PTSD and stuff like that, in terms of it opening neural pathways, and you can sort of redirect and reposition your thoughts and feelings on things. There's also like the further extent. So there's been like several cases of the extreme version of it. It's a DMT. It's like a dimethyltryptamine, I think. It's like very strong, very potent stuff where people have associated it with like the doorway to the next realm. And it's had like sort of, it's very hard to say because when you use any of this stuff, you immediately go, you're a hippie, because it's always back to that you're out in the bush dancing with fairies and stuff. But these people, like several cases, like actually there's been a bunch of them where they've seen they haven't been together. They've been, on different sides of the planet doing different things at different times, and they've seen the same thing, exactly the same, and they describe it to a perfect T. They haven't spoken about it, and it's just sort of like come to light just through general conversation. And they're like, I have seen that exact same thing when I'm on it, which is bizarre because it's like you think these things that you take, like when people have alcohol, they don't have the same experience. People smoke marijuana or do cocaine. It's not it's not really the same experience, especially when it comes to like altering your mind state. Even mushrooms, you don't really see or do the same things. But with this DMT, apparently they saw the exact same thing, and that it gave them a similar message.
I wonder if it's the kind of thing that Carl Jung investigated, where he investigated many different cultures, some of whom did use peyote and other mind expanding substances, and he wrote in terms of archetypes.
Yeah.
So the archetypes are and symbols, and how the same symbols and the same archetypes cropped up in these different cultures. So I'm wondering, without knowing much more about what you're just telling me, whether those things that people saw that were all the same, whether they map onto the same sort of symbols and archetypes that Jung was interested in. It seems a possibility.
Yeah, entirely.
That these are sort of etched in our souls in some way, and that we share them. I don't know. It's difficult. Well, I do want to sound a note of caution here. I want to say it again, that I don't recommend myself that people should take mind expanding substances.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons is that there are other ways which are safer, and in a way, I think, better, to get to the same place. And I'm talking about the kind of wisdom practices that I mentioned when we last spoke, the kind of spiritual exercises, particularly meditation, reflective practice, engaging with nature, reading scripture, reading philosophy, reading literature, reading poetry, engaging with the natural world, doing acts of service and acts of kindness for other people. These kind of things, you will, over a lifetime, gain spiritual insights. And if you then take under not illegally and a good safe circumstances, take mind altering substances, it may be that will promote that process. But I think there are great risks, and of course most people who take mind altering substances, they don't do it for the reasons of self-exploration. They do it for some sort of distraction purposes, or
that's right,
or entertainment almost, and I am very cautious, and I'm just wondering whether I should open my mouth and mention the one time where I took a mind altering substance.
If you tell me your story, I will tell you mine.
Okay, we'll be.
Let's do it together. Let's do it together, Larry. Yeah, they can't get both of us
together. Okay, fine. So I was a 23-year-old medical student with a tab of acid in my wallet.
Oh yeah,
which I carried around for a year, waiting for the right opportunity to take it, and I didn't actually think it would ever come. And I also thought that after a year, it was a little piece of blotting paper.
Yeah, it's not a lot.
And I thought, well, it's not going to work anyway. I've had it in my wallet for a year. Look at that. And it won't work. Anyway, I went to visit. I was a student at Cambridge. I'd finished there and gone to London to continue my medical studies. But one of my Cambridge friends had gone to study in Oxford, study engineering. And another of my friends from Cambridge and I went to visit this other fellow who I might as well call John. So Neil and I went to see John in Oxford, and it was a weekend. I think it might have been a Saturday. Or it may have been that we went up there on the Friday night, and then on the Saturday. Anyway, this morning we went into one of the colleges where he was he was attached to this college. I won't mention which one particularly, doesn't really matter. We didn't know what to do with the day. And we were sort of sitting around, maybe having a cup of coffee or something. And the subject of this acid tab came up. And these two guys said they would look after me if I took it. They would look after me. And Neil had done acid himself and knew what it might happen. And John hadn't. But they said they took care of me. So, okay, so I took it, completely thinking nothing was going to happen.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, I had a trip. I had a trip which was astonishing. I still remember quite a lot of detail about it, and I wrote an account of it the following day as well. And it started off pretty amazing. And I remember these two guys. We were walking around the sort of college grounds, quite some beautiful garden area, and I kept having these terrific insights. I could understand things that I had never understood before.
Oh, yeah.
And the guys were saying, well, tell us. And I said, yeah, I will. I'll tell you but later it's still happening. I'm still getting these more things are coming into my brain. And of course, later on, I couldn't remember any of it.
That's right.
Whatever it was that I had understood that was so fantastic, I couldn't. And then later we went out the college and into some parkland, and I started to see, it was a windy day, that I saw the trees were dancing. Actually, if you go and look at trees in the wind now, I wasn't seeing anything that wasn't
that's right.
normally, but I hadn't noticed it before, and it seemed so terrific, and I felt like I was connected in some way. Anyway, without going into too much more detail, later in the day, things started to sort of winding down, and I didn't get exactly panicky, but I didn't feel comfortable. I didn't feel safe. I think when we came out of this park, we had to cross a road. There was a lot of traffic, and I think my vision had got a bit blurry by now. And I just stepped out, and I was very, very close to a car. I don't know whether it stopped and actually was touching me, or anyway, I suddenly became a little frightened. And all I wanted to do then was go back to John's apartment, his flat where he was living, and sort of chill out. And things weren't, I just felt this general unease. And eventually, it was all over. It was all over within maybe 5 hours or something like that. And then I just felt completely flat. It was like all my emotions had just drained out of me. But as I say, the next day I went back home and I wrote an account of it, which I have here somewhere. I must reread it sometime.
Yeah, to pick it back up.
It made a difference to me. I think it did make a difference to me. I think there was a subsequent sense that there were mysteries that I hadn't been aware of that could be important, and whatever. It gave me a nudge, if you like. I certainly didn't feel like I wanted to do LSD again. I never have.
It's a bit rough. LSD is a bit harsh. So I've done that, and I've done mushrooms, and mushrooms comparatively much better.
Really?
In terms of like strength, and you can control mushrooms a little bit, whereas acid, that's like a ride that you just get on and hope for the best. My story went for a little longer. Mine was almost 14 hours. It was a long one. Once again, I think it's and I did it at the wrong time. Whereas the mushrooms I did when I was a little bit older, and I knew myself a lot better. But I think similar to you start to, obviously when it starts, it's fantastic. You're starting to see things, and everything moves, and it's got this sort of rhythm to it. But I think it's so connected to your brain as when the night gets on or the day gets on, and you start to get a little bit more tired. Like emotionally starts to become a little bit drained. So then things start to get a little darker. and a little more scary. And this is why you need safe spaces. But mine was I laid in the backyard for about 3 hours looking up at the stars, and that was it. That was probably the extent of it. Then I went walking, and then I went to a gig, which was a horrible idea. I was watching music, very loud music, in a very dark room with a lot of shadows. So that was a horrible, horrible idea. Yeah. But relating it back to what we were talking about, to in terms of like the old indigenous people, like it's very prominent in Native Americans. Yeah, doing peyote and stuff, and you're under the light, and you're with a group of people, and there's generally music, and there's something to sort of to swing your way. And I found with mushrooms that with that control, and if you have a bit more control over what you think, and emotionally, if you're a little bit more in tune with yourself, it's actually very insightful. It's incredibly insightful. I found that if I get stuck emotionally, and once again, I don't do this. Is not a very regular thing. It is once. I've done mushrooms twice. Emotionally, it clears out a lot of clutter. Like as you were finding when you were walking through, and things were hitting your brain, and you're like, I get it now. Like I understand this thing, even though you didn't remember it. Yeah, it brings a bit of clarity to your life. And once again, I think as you were saying before, a lot of people abuse it. Just like alcohol. Alcohol can be really fun, or it can be really horrible. And there's a very fine line between it. I think this is the same as these psychedelics that people take. I think if you use them correctly, and you're in a safe space, and you're using them introspectively, and you want to open your brain up a little bit, you want a different perspective. I think people need to step outside of themselves and have a look at themselves every so often. And I think things like, especially mushrooms, LSD is probably a bit too much. How's the mushrooms? The last time I did mushrooms, I'll tell you my story. I did nothing. I laid on the lounge, and I took it all in. Every thought, every feeling, things that made me angry, things that made me sad, and I sat in it. And I really took it on board. Instead of reacting to those emotions that were coming in, I sat there and I sat with it. And I think, in turn, outside of it, made me better. It made me realize that you don't need to react immediately to the emotion that's coming in, and you can sit and you can control it and not be so explosive.
That sounds very mature, and I think that's fine. That's absolutely fine. I'd like to know a little bit more about you, Josh. A little bit more about how you got to being that person who was interested in your inner self. Maybe what kind of a childhood you had, and so on, things like that.
I had a horrible upbringing. It was bad. I moved a lot. We didn't grow up with a lot of money. So I think, I don't remember a lot. It's very patchy. A lot of
How many in the family?
So there was, I have 2 older brothers and a younger sister, and then obviously my mum and dad. So what I really remember, I don't really remember good times. I remember being hard, very, very, very hard. Once again, moved a lot, very poor. I was sexually abused when I was younger, physically abused. I was introduced to drugs and alcohol like very early, not in terms of like me doing them, but seeing them actively done. So like it's like all of those things that sort of really skews you off your path very early. Didn't really.
So, how on earth did you get back straight?
It took a lot. It took a good long while. And it's one of those things. I think that's what made me a little bit introspective. It was, I think, like when you come from that type of place, it's not just your family, your immediate family. It's sort of your external family as well. So you see these mistakes being made constantly by your family members, and you're like, why are we still doing this? Like, why are we still, drinking to excess, or doing drugs to excess, or you know what I mean? And then you take a step back, and
using our children and things like that.
That's exactly right. So
are you the only one who's escaped, or have any of your siblings?
I escaped in there's no escaping it. You just, but
well, you don't live that way now.
No, definitely not. But I still have many things that I need to buff out, and I think things like I was very independent at a young age as well. So by by the time I rooted myself into a school, like a permanent school where I was there for longer than a year or two, and then started making friends, and then I started hanging out with my friends more, and then you start to see how other people live, and once you make that connection, and if you're wise enough, you kind of go, I don't want to do it. So then I started making my own path.
How old would you have been?
15, 13, 14 maybe. 13 and 14 when I started to realize things were wrong. Like up until this point, I think it's you got to look at any type of abusive relationship. It comes with a sense of no external information coming in, right? So if you, as an abuser, like even not saying that my parents were abusers, they did with what they could with what they had. And they probably just didn't know any better, and they were just stumbling through life like the rest of us, right? But then there's the things that come along with it. So by the time I was like 12 and 13, I was allowed to go to like my friend's house. I was before, but it was only for a couple of hours or whatever, or maybe like a drop off late, pick up very early. But at 12 or 13, I went to my friend's house, and I was allowed to stay there for like a whole weekend, like a Friday night, a Saturday. And it was a really weird turnaround, going like, wait, you guys have food in your house all the time? And they're like, yeah. And then they'd come over to my house, and they're like, why do you have no food at all? And then just the relationships between them and their parents are vastly different. You know what I mean? And it's and then you start to connect dots that things are wrong. Things are not. This isn't the way I live. Isn't normal. Like I always thought that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then I started. Obviously, there's a complete overcorrection in terms of like you make your friends and you want to do things to please your friends, and then sort of fell into the trap of trying to combine the worlds, where like the drinking and the drugs were involved, and pushing my blame onto everybody else and not taking responsibility for my actions, and then that sort of all happened, and then it all came to like a point when I was like 25, the ultimate point where I was trying to juggle both worlds. I ran a very successful personal training business, and I was making a lot of money. I was bringing it back, trying to like make everybody happy, and I was like, look, I'm doing well now. Like I've got my shit together, and it just never seemed good enough. It was always met with like, what, you think you're better than us now, like just stuff like that. And then it just got to a point where my brain broke. I cracked it. I couldn't handle anything more. I put myself in hospital. I had a really bad anxiety attack, like to the point where I thought I was dying. I said my goodbyes to myself, and I was like, this is it, man. You're done. I made one last wish for God. It's a weird thing. I don't even believe in that kind of God. I was just like, don't do it in front of my girlfriend at the time. Oh, not at the time. She's still my girlfriend. Hi, ma'am. I was like, just don't do it here. And I was like, because it was like 1 o'clock in the morning, and I was like, just don't do it here. I was like, you can take me, but just not here. Do it tomorrow, and I'll be happy to go. And that was my thought in my head. I went to the hospital. They kept me tied up to the machines for 8 hours, and then they're like, just relax. And I was like, okay. And then after that, me and my partner went overseas. We went to like through UK, through Europe and stuff. And being outside of all that external pressure, you get a lot of time to think. It's not like it's never there. It's just you never get time to think about it. So I had a lot of time to unpack and really take a good, long, hard look at my life and be like what the fuck are you doing? And that's when I started turning around. That's when I started really just being like, it's not about working hard and making money if you're just going to fuck it up over here. It's about, being a better person, like treat people well, Don't take on board the people who treat you like shit. If they're going to treat you like shit, you can just say, see you later, rather than trying to please these people constantly. It's about putting my head in the right direction. Probably believing in myself was probably the hardest one. I remember we were just traveling, and it was a weird, like, me trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life, because I just packed it all up. I left my job, like this career that I built up over years. I packed it up and I left, and then I was like, what was I going to do? And my partner was like, why don't you go to university? And where I'm from, that doesn't exist. University is not on the books ever. And it took a little bit of convincing, and then that sort of started the real change, where I was like, I applied and I got in, and I was like, holy shit, like that's never a thing. Like, I got told never, to not even try, because you're not going to do it. And then, like, it was one of those things. It's like all these things that I thought were out of my reach were suddenly, like, if I asked, I was getting it. And then it was like, from then on, it was like, oh, I want this job. I apply for it. You got it. Or, I want to start my own business again. And, oh, it's going to be nobody's going to like it. Everyone's going to hate it. And then it worked. So, I don't know. That's for me, getting out. Yeah, like I said, you're never out. It's I'm better, but then there's always leaving people behind, which you have to. I think if you go through any sort of really massive change, especially when your family is some of the issue, they're going to try and pull you back in. They're going to constantly go like, we need you here, which is understandable, but you can't, you kind of have to set your boundaries. And
yeah, they're toxic. There's a kind of toxicity to the situation.
Yeah, that's right. And like, I love my family dearly. But then there's, like, I've had to set really strict boundaries in terms of how much time I spend with them, how much I let them in my life, because it impacts me. Like, it weighs you down, and not in the hold you back, weigh you down. It weighs you down emotionally. Where I was, even at the start of this year, I was so emotionally drained trying to juggle my shit, their shit, and it just got to the point where I was like, I'm done. Like, I'm going to figure myself out again, being back in my hometown. And if you guys want to come along, you can come along. If not, I'll catch you later. But that's a bit of it. It's a bit of it, Larry.
Yeah,
that's the gist.
I mean, it's a roller coaster. Just give me a time frame. How long is it since you had that kind of breakdown or anxiety attack spell like that?
Well, to be fair, like, I had one.
You said you were 25. How old are you now?
32. But I've had one recently. It doesn't, like I said, it doesn't go away. It comes back in things, and then I just learned to mitigate it a little better. Like, I understand what fills my cup and what takes away from it, and I just got to focus.
So what are your, when things are tough, where do you get your courage, strength, hope? Where does that come from?
A few places, like my partner is incredibly understanding. It's not so I guess it's, last year my dad got diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, right? And it was at a time where I was just recently back in my hometown in Canberra. And I thought things were going kind of well. Like, things were starting to push forward, and I was like, I can rebuild everything that I thought I destroyed. And then my immediate thing is to just go get blind drunk every single time. And it was such a toxic thing that I picked up from my past that I'm really getting rid of now. Like, I'm understanding it now. So in terms of, like, where do I get it from now? It's internal. It has to be a very long, hard look at myself and go, you got two choices. You've got get completely blind drunk and just extend your problem, because you're going to be hungover tomorrow and you're still going to feel shitty. And then you're going to want to drink again or whatever. Or you can just buck up and get on with it. You can look at the situation for what it is, see what you can do to help, see what you can do to fix it, and then get on with it, I guess. That's sort of how I deal with it.
Is studying psychology helpful?
Oh, no. It's stressful.
But did you think it might be when you started?
No, definitely not. So I guess there's like, when you tell people you study psychology, everyone goes, is it to fix yourself? Definitely not. I understood that.
Well, actually, why not? I mean, it's not from my point of view, it's a perfectly reasonable thing to hope for.
I'm not saying that it isn't. For other people, fantastic, but for me, it never was. Like I knew my failings and my strengths. I knew them very well when I was younger. I just couldn't dig my way out of the failures so easily. And then all of my strengths were immediately met with, like some sort of abuse, like whether it be physical or verbal or whatever. So the failures seemed like the right thing to do. But so I've always understood myself in a sense that like I can control these things. I just need time and a bit of understanding. The reason why I got into psychology is because I went through shit and I know what it's like, and I know it's incredibly difficult, especially when you got nobody to fucking talk to. When you got nobody, like when you feel like there's nobody there and you're the only person on the planet, it's fucking horrible. And so that's why I got into it. I was like, I don't want anybody to ever feel like they've got nobody to talk to. Right. And I guess that's like an extension of this podcast is like, I think if I talk to people, then nobody's ever going to feel like they got no one to talk to.
I understand that. That's very good, noble, good. Well done.
Thank you. I try, but yeah, that's a little bit about my life. That's the surface. That's all the.
It made me feel I want to come and give you a hug.
There we go. The digital hug. Yeah, so I don't know, but I think it's one of those things like I've only just gotten to the point now where I can start telling my story without feeling shame or guilt. Not so much guilt. I don't really feel guilt, but it's shame. I always felt like
no.
I didn't want to take away from others by telling my story, or I didn't want to feel like I don't want the pity as well. So this is something that I've just sort of gotten over now.
There is some grieving. There is some grieving to be done. The grieving for your younger self, I would say.
Oh yeah.
Do you feel that ever? A kind of grief, a kind of sadness, maybe anger also.
There's the anger. Yeah, it was mostly anger, but it is a grieving now where it's just such wasted potential. I look at the younger version of me who had time on his hands, who had the energy on his hands, that could have done all of these things if he just knew he could. Instead of, I think, I'm always like, it's hard to look back and not be like, oh, you should have done this. I'm happy. I'm incredibly happy where I'm at now, and I'm happy I'm doing it now. And I know everything comes with purpose and reason. But I do look back, and I was very resentful towards my family originally, because once again, it's easier to blame others than it is to blame yourself. But I look back at myself, and I'm like, you dick, like you wasted too much time. And I'm very big on time. I know that time is not cheap, and I wasted a lot of it.
Well, I'm nearly 40 years older, and let me tell you, there's plenty of time.
I hope there's so.
Plenty of time, and because what you can do as a human being is infinite. It's infinite. There's no limit to it. So you can only do what you can do in the time that you've got to do it. So, I would just strongly recommend being as kind to yourself as you can ever be, and forgiving and loving, and to your younger self as well as to your current self. What about when you look forward to the future, to the next, let's say, 5 or 10 years? What do you see in your life?
I see a lot of things, like getting married, having kids, that type of stuff, buying a house. I think that
nothing too easy then.
I think
getting married and having kids is, I mean, I didn't get married until I was 61. So,
Oh, right.
and I haven't had any kids. So I would say those are big challenges.
Yeah, but I'm looking forward to it. I think like you, and I think if you've been, if you go through like hard challenges in your life, like from the start, from the get go, if you're faced with these challenges that bring nothing but pain and sorrow, you look forward to these happy challenges. Like it really puts a better perspective on them. Where it's like everyone's like, oh, you want to have kids? And you're like, yeah, 100%. Like I'm looking forward to the sleepless nights and the running after them, because it's a happy challenge. It's a challenge that life throws at you where you can look at it and go, it actually brings positivity and something beneficial to my life. So I think I don't know, like I said, I'm excited. Like I'm super excited, and I think I want to, once again, it's filling the cup. You can either fill it full of hate and anger and bad stuff and bad intentions and bad actions that go with it, or you can do the happy stuff and take the challenges that side comes with. So it'll be all right. Kids can't be that hard, right? So many people are going to be like, what? They can't be that bad.
No, dude. What about, I mean, you'll complete your psychology degree. Yeah. What are you going to do with that?
So, I've been really tossing up. I extend myself a lot. It's very hard. So, I don't know if I told you, like now I'm working 2 jobs and running my business and studying. And
yeah, you told me.
I'm one of those, I have to do every second every day.
You must, yeah. Why do you do that? Why do you do so much?
You tell me. You're the psychiatrist. I think, like I always say that it's like to keep myself out of trouble. But I think that's the first reason I've given it, because I haven't unpacked it a lot. I don't know. I've always liked being jam-packed busy. Like, so I get up at 4 a.m. and I like to just go until I fall asleep at night. And I enjoy it. Like that's really what I enjoy. I feel better. Once I adjust to it.
Quite exhausting for people around you.
Oh, yeah.
I imagine.
Oh yeah, it's not easy. But I don't know. Maybe it's a sense of like once again,
life's too short. It's back to what you were saying, isn't it? You've got time. You want to make use of it all.
Yeah, that's right. Also, I think it's like a deeply seated childhood thing. Not a lot of people work in my family, so it's like if I work, then that separates. That's the line between me and them. And if I keep working, I work hard enough, then if I can work and I can study,
You remind me a little bit of my father. He grew up in relative poverty, and he left school early, partly because he had some sort of, I mean, he was born in 1911, so so
Tough
when
times.
he was in school, things were quite different. But anyway, he left school early, I think partly to get paid work, like about 14.
Yeah.
But so by the time I came along, he was running a business, and he just worked all the time.
Yeah.
And he didn't actually give up his business till he was 78.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
That was his thing, and it was like he was driven, really. I mean, it was also a business that wasn't an easy business, at least as far as I understand it from him. It was just a necktie manufacturing business.
Yeah.
So, but there was never a great deal. The profit margins between manufacturing and selling neckties wholesale was not great. So they had to borrow money at the beginning of the year to buy the fabric to make into the ties, which they all sold at Christmas time, and then they got their money back to pay off the bank, and then they had to go to get another loan at the beginning of the next year. And it was a crazy system where they never could, it's a bit like the sled dogs in the Arctic chasing the sunset when the sun never sets.
Right. Yeah.
So anyway, Yeah, so I guess I can understand that when you come from that kind of a poverty background, he I think was terrified of running out of money. You know.
Yeah, there's a like, so even with the, now I understand, because I think my last job I burnt myself out. I packed it so tightly that not even just physically, like emotionally. As a PT, you take on a fair bit emotionally. So I think it's like the precursor to becoming a psych.
So personal training is mostly physical training, is that right? Mostly body training.
Yeah, it's meant to be. But
also people talk to you.
Yeah, it's like your barber, or and you just sort of get to know them, and you're changing their body. You know what I mean? And that physical change also comes with an emotional change. Right. They start to feel happier. Obviously, the endorphins are releasing, and usually when they get into it, it's always through an emotional experience that put them there. Something emotional attached to get them into the gym. I'm getting married, right? That's a big one. Like, there's a heavy emotional attachment. I bought
this wedding dress and I can't get into it yet.
That's right. Or, my partner left me because I gained weight. These are big things. So there's always like heavy conversation. And that sort of weighs on you, especially if you don't know how to like regulate it, and then deal with the shitty hours, the 5 hours of sleep a night. You go to bed at 11, you wake up at 5 a.m. And then you got to keep yourself fit. There's an expectation of you to look like a personal trainer. And then there was some other stuff peppered in there that wasn't very good either. So, then you burn out. So it's like, I think I've learned from that experience that, like, the working constantly doesn't provide money, because if you work constantly, then your service declines. And when your service declines, obviously money runs out, and then you need to take that break to refresh yourself, especially in that personal training. It is, personal. So it is one-on-one. So yeah, there is that thing. If I stop, it's all going to fall apart.
But you did that, and you proved it didn't fall apart, and you got to travel and see the world. So
yeah, it's a good comeback.
It's not.
I guess.
It's not. Just what I'm saying is it's not happening again. You're not beginning to take the. No,
I hope not. I hope not. I did have a conversation with my partner about it, and I was like, I'm worried. I'm really worried, because it's like things are starting to really pick up. Like, and I'm worried that it's obviously there's the work factor, but then there's a money factor. Money, trainers get paid quite well if you're decent, and then there's the attitude that comes to people with money. I was a bit of a dick when I had money. Like, it was just one of those, like, so for instance, when I went from Canberra, 25 years old, to Sydney, a year later, I was making 2 or 3 times the amount that I was making in Canberra. So it was like this huge pay increase. And then it became more and more, and I kept getting more and more money. And then I got the attitude that comes with it. I felt money gave me a sense of importance, like a sense of authority, because I never had it before. So I was like, this is the thing that's going to make me important. This is going to be the thing that gives me power. And it doesn't. It doesn't give you shit. It gives you a roof over your head and some bills to pay.
You should. Sorry, my answer machine's going off.
That's all right.
What you need to do is to tell people, the billionaires of the world that, some of them have learned that lesson, but some of them haven't. Not just the billionaires, lots of rich people. Some of them do. I think there was a very rich woman in America. Someone's really trying to get through on the phone here.
Do you want to get it? Did you want to get that?
If it's okay, I'll just
grab it. I'll get some water. Hi, ma'am. What are you doing?
I don't know where she is, and I'm on a Zoom call. Sarah? Someone on the phone?
He's on the phone.
I'll just put it there by my hat. Yeah. Okay. Okay, Josh, someone for my wife.
That's right.
Okay, well, we probably should wrap it up because my haircut is due any minute.
That's all right.
Sorry to do that because it feels like we're in the middle of something.
Hey, Larry, I got all the time in the world for you, my friend. So you'll be my
do it again.
You'll be my third timer. You know, you'll be back many times. I can see it already.
Well, I want to come and see your kids when they're there. You know.
Yeah, 100%. It's not that far off, my man. It's not that far off. Alrighty, Larry. Excellent. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Have a good haircut. Have fun playing golf again, my friend.
I will.
All right, Larry.
Okay, take care.
See you later,
God
buddy.
Bless you.
Bye-bye. Oh my goodness. Oh my damn. He was trying to get me. He's a psychiatrist, so he's all over it. He's much more knowledgeable than I am. Everybody, that was Larry. Larry's a legend. He's honestly one of my favorite people to have a chat to. It's very easy to talk to him. And that's Mem in the background. Fucking hell. Very easy to talk to, and it's good to see the difference between like old school and new school thinking. You can tell that he's very progressive. But he still has those old traditional ways, which I think is fantastic. It's you can definitely learn a lot. Other than that, everybody go check out WAWDH.com.au. We've got the website up. Everything is going through there. Go give me a 5-star on Apple, the iPod thinger, just so I can get a little further up. You know you want to. Other than that, share, like, distribute, do your thing, leave a comment, send a message, do whatever you do. Thank you so much for listening. Bye-bye.